Welcome to Combat Sports Talk, a podcast dedicated to UFC and Bellator discussion, the MMA community, and combat sports in general. I'm your host, Ryan Smith, and joining me this week is a new voice on the show, the man with the keys to victory, John Keys.
Oh, wow. You are too kind, sir. Too kind. This is a long time coming, actually, with all our offline conversations. But I hope to do some justice tonight because your normal co-host is awesome. So let's see what I can do tonight.
All right. Well, you know what? I am so glad that you were able to make some time. You know, for those of you out there, John and I work together. And, you know, we spend so much time talking about UFC. It is surprising that it's taken us this long to get something on recording. So I am so glad because I am pumped about these events.
Yes, absolutely. What we missed, I mean, we haven't talked in like 2 weeks, but we have missed so many good fights, so much good action, you know, both inside the ring, outside the ring. I hope we get as much in as we can, and let's make it entertaining for everyone.
Well, let's go do it. The lights were flashing brightly in Atlantic City, New Jersey for UFC Fight Night 128, which featured fierce striker Edson Jr. Barboza and Kevin the Motown Phenom Lee. Both were coming off big losses, and each were hoping that in this fight, they would get their championship quest back on track with a victory. But before we get too deep in the main event, let's check out the key action from this weekend on The Official Decision. The Official Decision. This is The Official Decision, a segment where we discuss the fights that matter from a weekend of fights. We're talking about UFC Fight Night 128 at Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City, New Jersey, Barboza versus Lee. The first fight of the night was Dan the Hangman Hooker, who defeated Jim Miller via knockout in round one with a knee from out of nowhere.
Literally a knee out of nowhere. And with a sound that sounded like if you hit a hockey puck and it hits the wall, that's exactly the sound you got. And you could see that everything, the conscious separated from Jim very quickly at that point.
Absolutely.
And he just collapsed. You know, it was just devastating. I was impressed with it. So. You know, good job with the Hangman for that one.
Absolutely. And, you know, the thing is that the referee was a little bit out of position. So after that knee landed, unfortunately, Jim Miller caught an extra little bit of a hook from the hooker and had one last finishing punch to end the fight.
Exactly. And I looked at that over and over again. I have to say about 3 times. And did it look like it was like a little bit of ill intention in that punch there? Like, you know, you beat me up for a little bit, so here's one for you to go home on. I mean, that's what I caught off.
You know, I don't know, because after they stopped the fight, he stood at a neutral corner, had his hands behind his back, kind of looked down at the ring. So, you know, I'm thinking that it was him trying to finish the fight. He got the knockdown, but until the referee calls a stop to the action, you have to keep fighting, and that's what I think he did. One interesting thing here is that Hooker is now on a 3-fight win streak. He's defeated Ross Pearson, Mark DeKessie, and Jim Miller, who is now on a 4-fight losing streak.
That says a lot. I mean, what's going to happen to Jim at this point?
I don't know.
They usually cut him at 2 or 3, so you know 4 is a stretch here. So,
yeah.
I mean, does Dana have faith in him that he can pull a win off, or? You know, are we going to see let's see, today is Monday night, so tomorrow morning we may see some axe flying and some heads rolling. I mean, you know, it definitely was not Sparta for Sparta, New Jersey.
That's right. So Jim Miller is from Sparta, New Jersey, and so, you know, with the 4-fight losing streak and losing with a knee like that to the face, this is not Sparta.
I'll give you points for that one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Last thing, the post-fight interview, Dan Hooker is talking to Paul Felder. Paul Felder is doing the color commentary, and so Paul Felder asks Dan, well, who do you want to fight next? And Dan says, hey, there's a guy standing across the ring from me right now that doesn't have a fight. So how about we hook it up? So he called out the color commentary, the commentator.
That's bold.
That's bold.
And a first, man. And on top of that, Paul Felder's no joke. I mean, I don't think he was. I don't know if he was thinking clearly at that moment, because Paul Felder is a devastator. I mean, I'd like to see that one. I mean, they're both kind of pasty. We have to wear some shades, or shades around the ring, kind of tinted a little bit. But we would see a great fight out of that.
Absolutely,
I would like to see that.
Absolutely. So number 8, Aljamain the Funkmaster Sterling defeated number 14, the Pikey Brett Johns via unanimous decision. This was pretty much a dominant performance by Sterling.
Indeed. Sterling was pretty much on his back more than a junior high backpack. I mean, it was. I saw a domination in every area, on the ground, standing up, clinch, on his back for a good majority of the time. Of his control time. I mean, what more can you ask for at this point? If you want a fighter to put on a definite show, to know that he is worth where he is at, and he wants more. I mean, what more can we ask for?
Absolutely nothing more than that. Number 8, David Branch defeated number 11, Thiago Mejia Santos via knockout in round 1. Now Santos is they call him the sledgehammer, and he's got tons of power. This is a middleweight guy that just has got lots of upside, and David Branch dispatched him quite quickly with a big right hand.
And that's good. I like that, for the simple fact that the previous outing that David Branch had, it didn't go his way so well.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing how good he really was. Okay, I mean, at first I was like, well, maybe we'll chalk it up to jitters. It was his first time in the octagon. No, very few people, win their first time in. But here we saw him. He seemed a lot more relaxed. He came in there. He brought the thunder to the hammer, and it was spectacular. Once again, David Branch. Kudos to that dude. I hope to see more of him, and hope to see more of him in a stronger fashion. I hope he evolves even more so on the next fight. All
right, Big Pretty Justin Willis defeated the Vanilla Gorilla Chase Sherman via unanimous decision. There was some bad blood coming into this fight. They did not like each other.
With names like Big Pretty and Vanilla Gorilla, I was already sold on the fight just on those names alone. But you're right, there was bad blood here, and that's what the UFC needs more of. Not in a way that like we saw maybe in the previous pay-per-view, but in a way that bad blood to spark rivalries, good strong rivalries, and get in there, show some emotion, show some ill will, but at least have some respect when it's all said and done.
Absolutely.
That's what the good fight comes to.
That's what a good fight comes to. And what I like about this is that this is really kind of showing us, the future of the heavyweight division. There's a lot of the people at the heavyweight division, at the top of the heavyweight division, it's been there a long time. One of the articles that we're not going to really cover on this show. But Junior Dos Santos is coming off of his PED suspension, but he's been around a long time. So it's great to see some of these heavyweights that haven't been, that we haven't seen before, that we, that haven't been fighting for the title for years upon years, coming up there, climbing that ladder. And I think that there's a lot to say about Justin Willis and Chase Sherman, in the future.
Yes, and this is what the heavyweight division has been needing for a long time, is new blood. It's just new talent. We need that new talent, because you're right. If you ask the average person on the street, who are heavyweights in UFC? We got Cain Velasquez. We have Junior Dos Santos. We have
Fabricio Verdum,
Alistair Overeem.
Right.
Fabricio Verdum.
Mark Hunt.
That's all they're gonna name. More than likely.
Mm-hmm.
And we need more of this. We need more of new talent. Okay, the Ngannous. Stipe. Being there, that's great. I like it there. That means that breeds, that tells other heavyweights it's time to come. All right, come get this guy. Because beforehand, the heavyweight champions that were there before, they were a cut above the rest. You know, at the time when Cain Velasquez was there, we didn't see too many people trying to knock out Cain Velasquez, and it made me think that people were kind of avoiding him to fight him because, you know, he'll separate your head from your shoulders. But now we have this influx of heavyweight challengers that are within a skill level of themselves, you know, from the lowest to the best. And so I'm hoping that this breeds a stronger competition within the heavyweight division that, you know, hopefully we'll maybe see from the lighter weight division. You know, I would love to see 10 good, strong heavyweights get in there and just show us some real talent. That's
Absolutely.
what I'm hoping for.
I completely agree with you there. So in the co-main event of the evening, number 3, Frankie the Answer Edgar defeated number 4, Cub Swanson via unanimous decision. You know, I think that Cub showed some energy late in the fight, like the third round, but I think that was a pretty dominant performance for Frankie Edgar.
You know, I'm a big fan of BJ Penn. Always been. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. Mm-hmm. And when I first saw Frankie Edgar come in there, I saw a man that was blazingly fast. Okay, on his feet, where his takedowns were vicious. I mean, you would blink and he's already on the ground beating poor BJ Penn. That's what I saw last night. I saw a man that didn't look like he lost much of his step, but his speed was there. And that's what the Answer brings to the table is blazing speed and some punching power behind him.
Yeah, he's got amazing footwork.
Yes, he does. And so I was happy to see, you know, Frankie win over Cub Swanson. Cub is a solid fighter. Don't sleep on this guy. He's been there for a while. He's a veteran. He's got the veteran demeanor about him. He can handle his own. It was just that night. The answer was to, you know, Frankie Edgar. You know, yeah. I have no. There was a solid fight once again for the past few pay-per-views. UFC has been putting out some good stuff. I'm glad that the fight makers are actually waking up and putting up some good fights now.
Yeah, even on the pay-per-views have been good, but when you get them on broadcast television, you know, that's the one where you're seeing these really competitive fights. One note that I wanted to add to this particular fight is that it's incredible that these two fighters came in there and gave us such a competitive performance, given the fact that Cub Swanson lost his, you know, one of his mentors during his training camp for this fight. And Frankie Edgar lost his grandfather like the week of fight week and lost his father the week before.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, and so both of them were suffering, you know, big losses to their family, and they came in there and still were focused and put on an amazing show. I give them, you know, huge credit for coming in there and staying focused, and given the fact that those dark clouds were hanging over both of those fighters.
Oh yeah, mental fortitude, man. That's another discipline that a real fighter would need to be in that ring. Okay, the ability to sit there and process it, understand it, but compartmentalize it and move forward. Which,
absolutely. You know,
it's something that every great champion possesses.
Well, someone who needed some mental fortitude was Edson Jr. Barboza, who faced off against number 7, Kevin the Motown Phenom Lee, and was defeated via TKO in round 5. It was a doctor stoppage. Kevin Lee just, I don't know what the word is.
Is anger beat a word?
Anger beat.
Anger beat. Can we use that in Scrabble? That's what I need.
You know what? I think that's a triple word score. Kevin Lee anger beat Edson Barboza for the win.
You know, who do we thank for that? Do we? Because I'll say it. I'll say the elephant in the room. I think Khabib should have got a piece of Kevin Lee's fight money, at least $10, $20, something like that. Because Khabib sat there and gave him the blueprint. Because if you watch how Kevin Lee beat him, it was exactly how Khabib beat him, except Kevin did it with an exclamation point. Okay, and I mean it was classic it was solid takedown, and you just saw Edson. The look on his face was like, it's happening again. Like, why am I here, man? Come on, really? So I say hats off to Khabib. Kevin, drop him a couple of 20s. Not that he needs it, okay, but just give it to him. Say, man, thank you for the blueprint. That's how I feel about it.
Now, we have to talk about, for the fight fans, if you didn't watch this fight, go back in and watch this fight. This fight was super dominant. Kevin Lee basically took him down within the first minute of the fight and just held him there and pounded, such that Edson Barboza is suspended indefinitely pending a CT scan. Like the doctors are like seriously worried that, Kevin Lee might have rearranged the circuits in his brain. Like, we may have Frankenstein walking through here now because it was so bad. But
well, yes, go ahead, please, go ahead.
But there was that glimmer of hope in round 3 where Junior Barboza spun around with that spinning heel kick, caught Kevin Lee on the top of the head, and we went from UFC main event to discotheque in Atlantic City.
Yes, and it was a beautiful chicken dance that Kevin Lee put on at that moment. And I mean, I was like, wow, this is the end of the fight. But once again, mental fortitude somewhere. Maybe it's part of his wrestling pedigree that he knew that he needed to clinch real quick.
Yeah.
Which is something that a lot of grapplers seem to forget when they get the stanky leg. I mean, they'll forget that they need to grab onto something. But luckily, Kevin Lee, went on autopilot, did a good clinch, and saved himself. And I think that's the reason why we now have Barboza on indefinite suspension, because by the doctor stoppage, his brain was actually, on the ground somewhere.
his brain was seeping through his eye. There was
exactly. It was like, wow. And I mean, the doctors were looking at him, and I mean, he had the glassy look in his eye and everything. I was like, man, please stop this.
Yeah, I think the doctor got a little sick. The doctor got a little sick because when the doctor came over and looked at it, she frowned up, and she just kind of did one of those little small shaking of her head, like, no, call this fight. It's over. Don't make this man go through anymore.
We're done here.
These types of beatings require us to play this song. So this goes out to you, Edson Barboza, for taking that beating for 5 rounds.
In the arms of the angel,
You too can help damaged fighters. Donate your $20 to the UFC Help Edson Barboza Recover Fund.
Don't you love Edson? Just slide that in there, man. Oh, man. Let's pray that, Edson makes it back, at some part. I mean, I don't want him to be like, Chuck Liddell or anything like that, where he's mumbling, in Portuguese, because it's hard enough that I'm barely understanding Portuguese now. I don't need to hear mumbling Portuguese. Okay, that would be bad, man. All right, that'd be real bad.
All right, well, let's close the book on this one and put it on the shelf, because this fight is history. Now, wait, what is that I hear? I think it's a hype train coming. Get your tickets ready.
Oh, boy.
Train.
This is the Hype Train, where we discuss whether or not we're punching our tickets to get on a particular fighter's hype train after their latest performance. The station is pretty quiet this week, with only a few trains here in the station. So let's start off with Dan the Hangman Hooker. This guy is 6'1", fighting at 155 pounds. I mean, he was just towering over Jim Miller.
Which says a lot. And Jim Miller has normally came in there as the shorty of the competitors in there, but he's always managed out. But he got him though. And with this, I think I'm going to have to jump on the hype train. I want to see what it's about. See where it takes me. I'll take that.
Very good. I mean, it's one of those things where people, look at this and go 6'1", 155 pounds. Yeah, this is one of those guys. Just like when we talked a couple of weeks ago about Zabit Magomedsharipov. These are guys that can use weight cutting to their advantage, and they can create these amazing matchups between them and their opponents by just having this sheer height and reach advantage over their opponent. So, I want to see one more fight. I want to see what he does. If they can schedule that Paul Felder fight for Dan Hooker, if he wins that fight against Felder, I'm on that hype train because he's on a 3-fight win streak right now.
Not only will I be on that hype train if he beats Paul Felder, but I'll wear the conductor's cap.
Well, there you go. There you go.
I'll say it here. Okay.
All right. Listen, the next one, Big Pretty. Justin Willis. This guy, now he had to cut. He had to cut to get to 265 pounds. He weighed in at 265.5 pounds. This dude is not what I would call a physical specimen, but dude has a punch from out of this world.
Yes. I'm not going to jump on the hype train with him just yet, but I can appreciate a fighter like that because his body type is just like mine, as a matter of fact. When I looked at it, I was like, he's like me, except a little bit shorter, but a lot more beard. I was like, I can relate to this guy. So, good kudos for Big Pretty going out there and doing the thing. Okay.
That's right. I'm like you. I'm going to pause on the hype train on this one, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that he is one of those new fighters coming in the heavyweight division. Let's see what he can do. As he starts to climb that ladder, he's got a lot of obstacles that he has to overcome, but I'm hopeful that he's going to make something out of himself. Aljamain Sterling.
Been on that hype train, man. Come on now. Aljamain, I like everything about him. He's gotten better and better, and let's put it out there. I mean, all right, remove his talent, which is hard to do. Remove his speed, which is hard to do. His coaches are too awesome, dude, to not have him on a hype train somewhere, man. Okay, I love his coaches, love their attitude. He's in good hands. Okay, whether I like some of his members of his stable, like Chris Weidman,
not a Weidman fan.
Say it like this. Yeah, oh man, we could talk. That's a whole nother episode, man. On why I don't like that man, but nothing against the skill. Just against his own hype. I have a problem with that. But Aljamain, he's the real deal. People watch him. If you don't believe me, watch his previous fights and tell me differently. That's what I say.
Well, I tell you what, I am getting on the Aljamain Sterling hype train. I was so impressed with his performance. I really liked his speed. I liked the way he brings great striking, mixes that with his kicking. Well, it's part of the striking, but still, with his hands, with his feet, it's got the wrestling. He's really got a lot of those components. And I do credit Ray Longo and Matt Serra for preparing him for going out there and winning fights. So I am on the Aljamain Sterling hype train. One more train to go. Kevin, the Motown Phenom Lee, are you on that hype train?
Man, that's a hard one. Okay, so with Kevin Lee, we see a guy, the Motown Phenom, came on the scene like, cross between, he had the attitude of Clubber Lang, but he had the charisma of Apollo Creed. Okay?
All right, okay.
And I like Clubber Lang, okay? I love it. So we combine that with his ability not only to talk the talk, but actually walk it sometimes. He missed weight a little bit. Not mad at him because he's just a pound.
No. No, I'm not. Okay, I'm gonna tell you like this. Mm-hmm. You're not gonna see much from me on this train. You're not gonna see it. You're not gonna see me on this train. Kevin Lee did not miss it by a pound. He missed it by 2 pounds. 155 pounds is the weight limit. They give you a pound at 156 to still fight. Mm-hmm. He weighed in at 157 pounds. That's 2 pounds.
Okay. All right. So we got to cut it off at that. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. He came in overweight. But I still like him. I still like his charisma because his charisma, it doesn't matter. You could beat a guy completely, which we know a lot of great fighters who can beat a person completely, but they have no charisma. This kid comes in with charisma, and he comes in with talent. I think he's overhyping himself by saying he's ready to fight Khabib. Nobody is ready to fight Khabib, okay? The kid was wrestling with bears, and I don't care what anybody says, oh, the bear was declawed and everything like that. The kid is fighting a bear. A bear is still a bear, last time I checked, okay? It will still maul you if you give it half a chance.
That's right.
So I will be there. I'll get on the ride for a little bit. All right? I like his style. I like that he's confident within himself. I like his backstory. Let's see where he goes. Let's see if he can get some gold around that way.
I'm going to tell you this, but I think it'd be better if Mr. Flavor Flav said it for you.
Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype.
Okay, let me say it like this. Kevin Lee, I do not like Kevin Lee. I don't like him. I feel as much about Kevin Lee as you may feel about Chris Weidman. Let me say it like this. You said it best earlier when you said that Kevin Lee needs to give Khabib a couple of 20s for this win. So when you think about it, yes, Kevin Lee, all he had to do was watch what Khabib did to Edson Barboza. He just basically repeated the same, the same tactics. But Kevin Lee coming in there saying he's the most complete fighter at 155 pounds, coming off of a submission loss to Tony Ferguson. Have we forgotten that Kevin Lee lost to Tony Ferguson? No way is Kevin Lee ready for Khabib Nurmagomedov. The only guy that I want to see fighting Khabib is my dude El Kakui, Tony Ferguson, who is out. So we'll let this go to Conor or Dustin Poirier. But I don't want to see Kevin Lee anywhere near the championship fight until he can get a little attitude adjusted. I don't like his attitude.
Oh man, come on! That attitude is what fuels the fire. Okay, he's darn you to Chael Sonnen. Okay, even though I think you're the God's gift to hype right now is Chael Sonnen. Okay, to the UFC. But he set a blueprint. That it's hard for people to follow because they don't understand the pattern to his madness. Kevin Lee is trying to do what he can to get to secure himself. I got no beef with that. Okay, does he think he's better? Did he get submitted by El Kakui? Yes, but consider that source. El Kakui is a vicious fighter. I mean, and and on top of that, remember, didn't Kevin Lee mount El Kakui pretty quick? Didn't
he took him down. He did some damage, but the fact is that El Kakui fights from his back. He is an elite jiu-jitsu guy. He fights from on top. He fights standing up. El Kakui can fight you anywhere. Kevin Lee is a dynamic athlete. He's got power. He's got speed. He's got all these things, but he doesn't have the attitude that I want to see from a champion. I'm still upset that he fought that fight with a staph infection.
Yes.
I'm still mad about that.
That part, and I understand that because that's a risk to both fighters. Okay, I get that, but I want him in that mix. I don't want him immediately next, but as a good alternative, I would love to see him as an alternative in any one of those matches to decide the belt. Right. I'll keep him there.
All right. Okay.
And if he happens to be the next opponent, if Khabib says, yes, let me have him. Hey, let us have him. Okay?
All right. Okay.
Because I think that Khabib is the only one out of all of the other fighters that if he beats him, when he beats him, that will mature Kevin.
All right.
He could get beat by Tony Ferguson. He could get beat by everybody else, and he will still talk crap at the end. But Khabib has got to beat him to humble him.
All right. Well, you're on the hype train. I'm not on the hype train. All the trains have left the station. So let's check out the news and headlines getting attention in the MMA world. This is Finding the Angles. Finding the Angles.
You are
the topics people are talking about in the UFC and around MMA. And the first one is a controversial end to a fight in Atlantic City. This is Ricky Simon versus Merab Dvalishvili. This was a fight where Ricky Simon had Dvalishvili in a guillotine choke. So he's choking Dvalishvili, and in order to show that he's not in danger, what he's doing is he's giving thumbs up to the ref and to the crowd, and he's kicking his legs kind of in a bicycle motion just to show that, hey, I'm not trying to get out of this, but I am not in danger of passing out, which is what happens whenever someone chokes you for a prolonged period of time. This goes on for a full minute, and at the end of the bell rings, the ref breaks them up, and literally Dvalishvili lays on the ground for count 1 second, count 2 seconds, and then turns to get up. And they call that a TKO via technical, they call it a technical submission, is what they call it. And they give the fight to Ricky Simon. It's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And I think I could play devil's advocate, but my first instinct when I saw that was he was not out. He just took a breath. He just had a guy's forearm across his trachea for, a good part of a minute and a half. So, I mean, give the guy a couple of breaths. His eyes didn't look that glassed over. He just laid there for a few seconds, like, thank God it's over. And by the time he said, thank God it's over, and like kind of moved, they're like, you're out, and they did that.
Yeah, the refs, the doctors, they rushed in, and as he was trying to get up, they pulled him back down and had him lay down, and it's like, listen, this guy is not out. I don't understand how they called it. I mean, and different refs have gone to taken to the Twitterverse to support the decision to score this as a technical submission, when in actuality, I don't think that Dvalishvili was ever in any danger, and I don't think that he was out.
Now, let me play devil's advocate for one moment.
Okay.
Now, we'll have to go back into the archive, the UFC archive. Exactly. And there was a fight with Tank Abbott. And I forgot the guy's name. It doesn't matter for posterity's sake. But if you go back to the early days, or what you call the dark ages of UFC, there was a fight where he knocked a guy so hard to the ground that he went into a seizure. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, with that seizure, and most times you see it, you'll catch it, and the cameramen are quick to throw it away. But his movement, you could definitely tell for a second there that he was in a seizure. But he had the movement, and they're saying there that when the guy was in the neck crank, we'll call it, that after a while he was fluttering his feet, but his arms stopped moving at like the last 10, 15 seconds. Mm-hmm. And that's where they were saying that he was possibly out, and he was possibly, they don't want to call it seizing, but, I know a flailing guy on the ground that's unconscious and possibly in shock when I see him. He's seizing, okay? He could have been possibly seizing, and once he let go and he was actually able to get air, he's coming back. That's what I think that the ref was thinking there. Not saying it was a good call. It was not a good call. In reality, I agree with you that yes, he was fully awake. He was fully awake. Yeah. Maybe had he did some extra stuff with his legs, maybe if he did some cross kicks or do like the cross, maybe do some 6 inches or something like that, but not keep it in a rhythmic motion like he did. Maybe that would have made the difference there. Maybe. I
don't know. Dvalishvili's team said that they're going to appeal. I hope that they get the appeal and this gets overturned. But that's a really tough call. I don't know that they will overturn it because they felt pretty confident in that.
Yeah, and I don't think they'll overturn it either. I think he's going to have to bite the loss for this time. Hopefully, the UFC will be gracious enough to say, if he wants to go, if they want to roll it back again, they give him a second chance at a fight.
Yeah. UFC 226, Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. This fight has been signed. This is basically the movie Rampage in an octagon. You've got freaking King Kong versus Godzilla in a fight that will determine nothing more than who can knock out who.
That's absolutely correct. We have our latest version of Rock'em Sock'em robots in the ring, okay? All you have to do is show up and watch it. If you are a fan of watching people if you watch World Star Hip Hop more often in your day than you do normal TV, this is going to be the fight for you, because there's not going to be anything pretty. This is not going to be pretty. Don't look for no technical kicks. Don't look for no technical takedowns. There's not going to be anything fancy. No Superman punches. No Matrix elbows. It's just going to be fist on face for 15 minutes. Maybe.
Okay. It may be fist on face for like a minute and a half. If it gets to 5 minutes, it may be hands on hips and breathing hard.
Yes, breath on face after that. For, round. And then, we're going to see a lot of hand on back of neck, just go down. And then, maybe they'll give them a round, 5 minutes of Rock'em Sock'em, 5 minutes of I need a break and just breathe and look at each other and pretend like they're circling the ring. And then the last 5 minutes, we go back to, the last 2 minutes, we'll go back to Rock'em Sock'em.
Right.
Yes.
I think it's good. I'm glad. So UFC 226 is occurring in July. That is International Fight Week. That is that is like the Christmas of the UFC. It's the time when they spend an entire week just on MMA and the fights. They bring all of their stars. They have all of their conventions and everything at this 1 week, and then they finish it off with one of the most spectacular cards of the year. This is just one of many that they're putting on. So we'll be reporting in the future the other fights that are coming up on UFC 226.
Absolutely. Have you been there? Because I went to Vegas. My first time going to Vegas was actually 2 years ago at the end of Fight Week, and it was It was the Sunday, and it was still busy. I mean, it was still buzzing from the night before, and they still you crowds everywhere. You saw everything there, and I'm definitely maybe, hopefully this year, if my girlfriend gives me the okay, I might end up back down there.
So
just to test it out.
That's one of my goals for the podcast, is that someday I hope that we're able to grow the podcast large enough that we'll be able to go and broadcast from International Fight Week. That's one of the long-term goals for Combat Sports Talk, is to be live on the air at International Fight Week for the entire week.
Wow. So, that will be that's Nirvana right there.
Yeah,
that's true Nirvana.
That's what we're going for. So, for those of you out there, keep supporting us, and someday we will be there at International Fight Week. Hey, I want to go on to this next story. Joe Rogan on Conor McGregor's special treatment. He had a long monologue that he because he likes to rant a little bit. But this is what stuck out to me, and this is from MMA Mania. Switch it around. Imagine if Ray Borg threw that dolly and Conor was inside. He would be gone. His career would be over. That's one of the more effed up things about this, is that that Conor is getting special treatment. He is, and that's not good for anybody. What are your thoughts on Conor McGregor's special treatment?
You're absolutely spot on. Had it been anybody else, and I do mean anybody else, that was not bringing money in, much like how Conor has brought it in, much how John Jones has brought it in, they would have been gone before that. Before they left that building, they would have been fired. Okay, no doubt about it. I find it unfortunate. I find it unfair. But what we're seeing out of the UFC currently is a bit of favoritism, and it's not favoritism in a good way. Okay, because what has happened had Rose did break her hand? Okay, how are you going to smooth that over? Okay,
Yeah.
That's what had happened if Michael Chessie had got seriously damaged, injured more so than he did? What if Ray couldn't get that glass out of his eye? What if they weren't able to do that? Okay, and you still haven't said Conor has been released from the UFC. Dana and the higher powers that be were afraid of stripping him of the belt. Now we know why, in my opinion, because he's crazy. He's crazier than a bag full of monkey nuts. I mean, he's just out of control. I mean, he showed up with his Braveheart and was all over it. I was like, I get it now, Dana. I know why you didn't say we will strip you of this belt, but that is no excuse for his actions. And I think he's understanding that, the ramification, because now that, the plane ride back, the alcohol is worn off, he's understanding now, oh man, I may have just screwed my entire career with the UFC, because if they give me a felony, that's the end of my visa.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that, even if he loses his visa because of the felony, then the UFC is just going to start booking him in Dublin, in London, in, all over the
Toronto.
world. Yeah. Not in the United States. And I think that's the most disheartening thing, is that when you come down to it, Conor McGregor represents such a boon of income for the UFC that, like other people we know, Conor McGregor would be able to kill someone in the middle of Times Square and he would still not be cut from the UFC.
Indeed. Like how you did that. I saw
you saw what I did there?
Saw what you did, big time.
Okay.
But, so, there should really be a hammer coming down on Conor, not from anybody else but the UFC for this. There needs to be some serious repercussions, because right now it's looking like he's going to get a slap on the wrist
and then a fight with Khabib.
Let him go back.
And a fight with Khabib in the biggest fight in UFC history. Like, think about that for a moment. That Conor McGregor will have. I really do need us to just think about what we are getting ready to see and why the UFC absolutely has to stand on its moral conviction and stop this from happening. Because you are going to have a fighter who will have won the lightweight championship, beat Eddie Alvarez, not defend the title, go and fight Floyd Mayweather, win $140 million, not defend the title, talk smack on Twitter, and then come in, just create sheer chaos at an event, injure two fighters where they can't fight, injure a UFC employee, and then potentially injure other fighters that were on the on the bus. He ends up getting several misdemeanors and a couple of felonies. He pays his bail, goes off to back to Dublin. Actually, he went and took a Caribbean vacation, by the way. And then he is positioned to be able to not only get a slap on the wrist from the UFC, but they are going to book him for the biggest fight in UFC history. In the 25 years that the UFC has been in existence, they are getting ready to give this guy the biggest payday that they have ever seen. That's special treatment.
It is, but it's needed. It's a necessary evil. Okay, let me explain necessary evil. Sometimes, in order for us to get to the high ground, we got to stay in the dirt for a while. Okay, and the UFC right now, there's often been the talk that the UFC is strapped for cash. Okay, so they got to do these things. I understand why they're doing the super fights series, I guess we'll call it. It's because they need the money, and I get that. So, as much as it hurts me if they got to act like Don King for a while and do some dirty things to hype up fights and get this money out there, in order for them to sustain themselves, that they can at that point go to a higher moral ground. Say, look, we did this in the past. We cannot do this anymore. I understand that. Okay, this is an opportunity that we cannot afford not to see. Okay, because whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. Okay, if anybody saw the look in Khabib's eyes, it's going to happen. He pretty much said he doesn't care if it happens in the octagon, in the gyms, on the streets, in the back alley, in somebody's yard. It's going to happen. Okay, it would be in Dana's best interest to go and put it in the ring and let it be a spectacle.
Yeah.
Do I say it's right? No. But do I say that it will make a lot of money so we can actually get the UFC back in the definite black rather than we believe it's in the black? It will put it in the definite black, and we can hit that moral high ground where we can say, okay, we're not going to do this again. We're going to do it the right way. We're going to make the rankings mean something. Yes, do that.
Well, when you talk about rankings, I have a whole blog on how we can make the rankings mean something. Let's continue.
And it was a very good one.
Thank you, sir.
Very good blog, by the way.
I really appreciate that.
People should read that. I mean, I'll tell you, read it. CombatSportsTalk.com. I mean, go there and read it. It's good stuff.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Let's move on. Who is Leslie Smith? Have you ever heard of Leslie Smith and her Project Spearhead?
Okay, I've never heard. I know who Leslie Smith is. She is a 10-7-1 no contest. Nicknamed the Peacemaker. She's one of the few fighters that's actually still walking after fighting Chris Cyborg. Which
wow.
I'm like that. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
She walks and she actually speaks well too. Okay, so but as far as Project Spearhead. No, I know very little of it. Why don't you explain?
So Leslie Smith is, like you were saying, a UFC fighter, but she's also the interim president of Project Spearhead. And Project Spearhead is an association that's trying to create a fighters union to increase the rights of athletes in MMA, but specifically in the UFC. And they see this as a grassroots fighter-led union, and that is what they're calling Project Spearhead. The thing is that the UFC doesn't want a union. They absolutely they don't, because if they get a union, then that means the fighters get collective bargaining power, which means that fighters' salaries, even at the lowest levels, begin to go up, that they begin to have a little more say in what goes on with regards to how fights are made and what rankings actually mean, and that begins to create a power shift from Dana White and the head offices of the UFC and the fighters who, let's face it, they've been clamoring for more pay and better conditions for a very long time. But the fact is that individually the fighters have no power, and that they are afraid to come together under a union because then they might find themselves cut. And that's why Leslie Smith is so important, because at UFC Fight Night 128 in Atlantic City this past weekend, she was on the card to fight her last fight. Her opponent was overweight, missed weight, and so Leslie said that she would fight her opponent even though she was overweight on one condition, that the UFC would extend her contract, because she wanted to stay in the UFC and still have access to these fighters to be able to keep Project Spearhead and keep marketing Project Spearhead to build this union within the UFC. The UFC said, you know what, Leslie? We're going to pay you your show money. We're going to pay you your win money. And we're going to call this fight a victory for you. And you are no longer under contract for the UFC. And now she is a free agent on her own. And that brings up the question, is this hardball by the UFC?
Yes. Yes. Because if you have somebody that's potentially that dangerous to your organization, okay, no matter how good the intentions, you're going to do everything that you can to leave it to peacefully amicably leave on good terms. I don't know any other situation where a person misses weight by 1.8 pounds,
something like that.
and not only did they get the show money, they got their win money on top of that.
Right.
And they were shuffled out the door.
Right.
Never. That's unprecedented. That to me tells me that, you want to, extend your fight contract, knowing who you are and what you do. Nah, we're going to give you a whole bunch of money. That way, when you talk bad about us, we can sit there and say, look, we did everything we could to appease to you. Leave us alone, okay?
Oh, wait, they're taking the moral high ground? What?
Oh, yeah, the moral high ground off of Don King level, man. That's Don King level moral high ground. But that's like purgatory, man, okay? So I saw what they did, and anybody who understands business, you should saw that too and saw it for what it was. They got rid of her. Okay, and it's unfortunate,
Well, guess who's getting a shot at the UFC? Former Dallas Cowboy. The headline was disgraced, but I just stuck with former Dallas Cowboy Greg Hardy. Is going to get a shot on the UFC Contender Series. So he's 3-0 as an amateur, and he is making his professional MMA debut with a chance to compete in the UFC. He is going to be fighting on June 12th.
That is gonna be interesting. How old is Greg Hardy?
I don't know how old he is, but he got into trouble a couple of years back with a domestic violence case, and so he was poised to end up going to jail. It was several misdemeanors. I think he was going to be potentially in jail for between 6 and 18 months or something like that, or 6 months and then 18 months of being on probation. But because the key witness didn't show up, he was able to get off. But I don't think that the NFL picked him back up. So a lot of fighters, a lot of football players, they move from the NFL, especially defensive guys, because their hands are so fast and things like that, they move into the MMA world. So he's gotten some training. He is poised to make his UFC debut or his professional debut on UFC Contender, and he's fighting Brandon Sales, who is 5-1 as a professional. So he's got a pretty stacked opponent with Brandon Sales, who's got 6 fights as a professional.
Well, as long as he doesn't end up like Bob Sapp, that's all I worry.
Well, Bob Sapp. Mm-hmm. For those of you out there, Bob Sapp is a 300-pound, gorilla who cannot take a punch. He will tap out because he makes the financial decision, not the competitive one. It is a disgrace.
Exactly.
Santiago.
Exactly. And I don't.
Oh, go ahead.
I just don't want him to end up like that. I hope he, if he's 3-0, I want to see what he's going to do against him. I want tougher competition. Let's see how he progresses. He may be next heavyweight.
We'll see. MMA Fighting reported that Santiago Ponzinibbio is out of UFC Chile's main event due to an injury to his hand. We talked about this on the show previously a couple of weeks ago, that finally Kamaru Usman, who is, I am not currently on the Kamaru Usman hype train, but KC is. And, we both recognize that this is one guy who's getting the short end of the stick because he fights in a way that is not super entertaining. He's a elite wrestler, basically kind of has the Ben Askren syndrome, where he can take somebody down, control them, beat them up the entire fight. It's not pretty, but it's effective. And so he's having trouble finding fights. He finally fought down because he's ranked like number 7. He's going to fight Santiago Ponzinibbio at number 10 at the main event in Chile. And now Usman has to find another opponent. And frankly, he was on the MMA Hour talking about the fact that he started off at the top. Tyron Woodley was injured, so he went down all the way from number 1 down to number 10, and he finally got a fighter to agree to fight him at number 10. And so what he's saying is that they better find him another opponent because he's not fighting an unranked opponent. That's just not happening. It's wasting his time.
Yeah, that is true. However, beggars can't be choosers. And if anything, he has the ability to sit there and call out every ranked fighter, every top 10 fighter on that roster. If that happens, I mean, I would let them give me anybody. I'd be like, I don't care who you sign them, because everybody ranked above him is getting called out, and not in the nicest way possible.
Yeah, they're not taking that fight.
The entire division.
None of them wants to take that fight. Everybody's scared. I frequently post that Kamaru Usman is a problem that nobody wants.
That sounds like Ben Askren. Look at that.
That's right.
Do we have the second coming of Ben Askren?
He's Black Ben Askren.
Kamaru Usman.
Kamaru Usman is Black Ben Askren. That's what he is.
I will take that. I will accept that. Okay, and that says a lot. That means that this guy is a dominant force of nature, and nobody really wants to have that bad of a day.
No. That's right. Too bad Usman can't cut to 155, because I would love to see, I'd love to see Kevin Lee. I mean, Kevin Lee is already missing weight. I mean, why don't he go ahead and have some of that tiramisu? Go ahead and get up to 170. Eat as much tiramisu as you want, man. Go face Kamaru Usman. If you're so bad.
I don't think he wants that either. Yeah, I don't think he wants that either.
I sure don't.
I think Khabib wants it. I think Khabib will fight him I think Khabib will fight him at his weight, and don't care what weight that Usman comes in, and he would fight him anyway. I think that's how much I love Khabib, because that's the type of fighter we need now. Okay, that mentality. That is the next generation fighter that we need, because it's going to take fighters like him to evolve to the next level for UFC, for MMA in general. Fighters that will be like, I will fight you anywhere. It just happened to be the ring this time. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people like Khabib Nurmagomedov will bring back this, this sense of pride and sportsmanship that the UFC is currently lacking with their whole, Conor McGregor experiment.
Yeah. I think Khabib has got like this old school vibe about him that I really like. Mm-hmm. That they're just very old. It's a synthesis of old school and new school. That he has that old school fight mentality of honor, and he's got this new school mentality of talking really good smack for a broken language. Broken English. He talked it well.
All right. Speaking of someone who talks some smack, Matt the Terror Serra enters the UFC Hall of Fame. This just so we can kind of talk a little bit about his accomplishments. He was famously known for the knockout that he experienced by the back fist of Shoney Carter.
Wow.
That's what everybody knew him as, the guy who got knocked out. He's the guy that got knocked out by Shoney Carter. That was what his claim to fame was, coming into the Ultimate Fighter Season 4, where he won the Ultimate Fighter Championship, and actually defeated Shoney Carter in the process.
Yes, he did.
In winning the Ultimate Fighter Season 4, he got a shot at George St. Pierre, and he rocked the world by knocking out George St. Pierre and becoming champion. He was only champion for a year, where he never defended the title, because George St. Pierre came back the very next fight and beat him in the second round. But he currently trains the likes of Aljamain Sterling, who we talked about earlier.
Yes.
Al Iaquinta, who we talked about a couple of weeks ago, who fought Khabib Nurmagomedov in a great fight. And then someone that I know is very near and dear to your heart, Chris Weidman.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Do you think that Matt Serra has done enough to be in the UFC Hall of Fame, or do you think that this is just because he does all these shows with Dana White and he just kind of hangs around? He's just a personality, and so therefore they gave him a Hall of Fame. Do you think his record, his time in the UFC is Hall of Fame worthy?
Okay, so we had this conversation. One of our very first conversations was about the pound for pound fighter. Okay, and your standards for the pound for pound fighter. One of which is what did he bring to the table? Okay. Matt Serra, he's one of those guys that he follows. It's the old adage: if you can't do, teach. Okay.
Okay.
And that is where Matt Serra excelled. He was an average fighter. Okay. His claim of fame, you're right. It was Shoney Carter that knocked him out with the spinning back fist. I think it was the first time that the spinning back fist was ever used effectively, and it was on him. That's kind of jacked up, but it is what it is.
It is what it is.
But it's also the fact that he was also that Matt Serra is the first American to have ever got a black belt under Renzo Gracie. Okay, which they say next to Hickson, Renzo is the hardest to get a black belt under. That says a lot, and he brings that teaching to the likes of Chris Weidman, who eventually beat the greatest middleweight that has ever walked in, that ever graced the octagon, and Anderson Silva. We have Aljamain Sterling, who is an up-and-comer. He has Raging Al Aquinta, who I think is bonkers. Okay, Lieutenant. I don't think I can say the word on here because I think it's PG, but he's a little crazy. Okay, he earned his nickname. Okay.
Right.
So, and I think what he's done at Serra Longo has been phenomenal. So, I think, yes, he with the knowledge that he has brought to UFC, has earned his credentials to go into the UFC. Okay, to the Hall of Fame. I think it does.
Oh man, I'm sorry. I like Matt Serra. He's a nice guy. I got nothing bad to say about him except for the fact that who are they letting in the Hall of Fame these days? You don't let somebody in the Hall of Fame because they were a good coach. You don't let somebody in the Hall of Fame because because they got a black belt under Renzo Gracie. What did you do in the ring?
Okay, what did he do? Okay, I can answer that. If it wasn't for him, we probably would have not gotten the GSP that we have today.
That is not why you put somebody in the Hall of Fame. This was a lucky shot. He got lucky. 9 times out of 10, Matt Serra loses to George St. Pierre. This was a lucky shot. There is no way that this happens. But, oh my gosh, this is not a Hall of Fame career.
Matt, okay, that's also another thing that a lot of people said that there was a lucky shot. Not exactly so, because Matt has a hands of stone, much like Johnny Hendricks does.
If he's got hands of stone, how come when George St. Pierre came back, he got railroaded? He got anger beat. What is that?
Anger beat, yeah.
He got anger beat.
Okay, so what happened there, George St. Pierre evolved because when he got beat, okay, Dana wasn't going to let him have that fight, go back to fight Serra so quickly. So he made him fight a couple of fights to get back there. And if you remember those 2 fights that he fought to get back to Matt Serra, he rolled those guys over. Okay,
because George St. Pierre is a Hall of Famer. I'm just thinking about the people who are in the Hall of Fame, and I'm just saying, when you think of Hall of Famers, Anderson Silva, Hall of Famer, Chuck Liddell, Hall of Famer. When you think about George St. Pierre, Hall of Famer, someday someone like Daniel Cormier is going to be a Hall of Famer. And then you look at a guy who lost basically every major fight that he had to fight. He got one accolade by winning the Ultimate Fighter Season 4 that shot him past everybody to get a title shot, which he made good on, but could not defend that title shot one time. I mean, let's face it. This guy has defended the title as many times as Conor. No, actually, he defended the title once, but he didn't win. So he's actually better than Conor McGregor. But that does not make him a Hall of Famer. Matt Serra, you are a company man. Dana White is taking care of you, but I don't think that this guy is a Hall of Famer, and I'm gonna make sure that that's the last word, sir.
Oh, Fair enough.
All right. Those are the headlines making waves in the MMA world. Let's look at the fights coming up this weekend with the fight card. This is the fight card where we look at the matchups that matter coming up this weekend. There are no UFC fights until UFC 224 on May 12th, which is Amanda Nunes versus Raquel Pennington. But the red-crested stepchild has a weekend all to itself. Bellator 198, Allstate Arena, Rosemont, Illinois, Fedor versus Mir.
And you complain that there shouldn't be a Masters division. There's two old guys right there.
Well,
okay? Get ready to battle it out.
Yeah, well, let's run through this so we can talk about that. Catchweight, we got Dylan Denise versus Kyle Walker. Neiman Gracie, part of the Gracie clans, fighting Javier Torres at welterweight. We got John Salter versus Rafael Lovato Jr. Middleweight. Emmanuel Sanchez is going to fight against Sam Cecilia, who's a former UFC guy, at featherweight. And then the main event of the evening, Fedor, the Last Emperor, Emelianenko versus Frank Mir. Does Frank Mir have a nickname? I don't know that he does.
Chump. D-bag.
Oh, wow. Woo! Okay.
Passive aggressive arm breaker.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You're not too happy with that guy, huh?
Man, salty as a pretzel about that guy, man. I really am, because he tries to come off as like with the Nogueira fight. Okay, he sat there, and if you watched it, he went immediately for the snap. He wasn't even trying to wait for Nogueira to tap, and then he goes to the post fight like, well, I tried to give him a chance, and I had to snap his arm. In the back of his mind, like, I went for the snap because I'm taking an arm home tonight. That's what he wanted, and he got it. So, own up to it. Frank Mir, for all his accolades and possible UFC Hall of Famer, I hope not.
He at least was a champion, and he did more in the UFC than whatchamacallit. But he's not going to get a Hall of Fame because he went to fight for Bellator. So he's out. He's like Frank Shamrock. So can we get a flash fight pick? Fedor Emelianenko versus Frank Mir. Who you got?
Man, I'm going with Fedor just on general principle, man. Okay, Fedor's been around for. I guess he was around with the Last Emperor back in the day.
He's been around a long time.
Yes, he has. So I'm gonna give it to him because I like Sambo. Sambo, to me, in my theory, and I've contemplated this a lot. They've proven time and time again that mixed martial arts is a proven capable fighting art. Sambo, in my opinion, is the predecessor to MMA. With all the skills that are designed for it, stand up, clinch, grappling. I got Fedor making Frank Mir tap by leg lock because Sambo loves their leg lock. All right, and I hope he takes a leg home with him tonight to add to his collection.
All right. Well, all I got to say is this: I have a rule: never bet against the Russian. Fedor Emelianenko is going to win this fight. Frank Mir, he's improved his striking game. He's improved, he's always been a jiu-jitsu guy, a grappler, but I liked what he's done over at Jackson Wink, and improving his hands and his feet before he left the UFC. I don't know where he's quite training now, but I think that Frank Mir has become a more complete fighter. He's going to come in way big too. So he's going to be outweighing Fedor, but never bet against the Russian. I've got Fedor Emelianenko by decision in this fight. Sir, do you have anything else you want to add before we go?
Man, no, I think I'm good. I think I got everything off my chest. And when you say that you never bet against the Russian, you're like talking about the original Russian there.
Yep.
With Fedor. Okay, the Red Devil combat team has been around since the Pride days, and they were the original gangsters. Okay, so and his brother is proof of that. So that's all
Literally.
I got about that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for filling in for KC on tonight's show. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You are probably the most knowledgeable UFC expert that I personally know, and I thank you for sharing your knowledge with us on Combat Sports Talk.
Ryan, it's been a pleasure. You are far too kind, sir. It's been a pleasure. I've listened to you guys talk. One day I would love to have a three-way conversation where we could just sit there and just talk for hours on this. This has been absolute fun. If you ever need me to come back, you just tell me when, and I am there. Okay?
All right. Well, if I may have to take you up on that. We'll have to see. But let's have you back for the International Fight Week show. We'll bring you. We'll have KC. We'll bring George G Money that does the live broadcast with me during the actual pay-per-views. We'll have all four of us. We'll maybe even bring some more on, and we'll do a 2-hour blockbuster for International Fight Week. And let's set that one off correctly.
Absolutely. I'm down.
All right. Well, follow us on social media. On Twitter, I'm at CST Ryan. KC is at CST_KC, but like he always says, you might find better luck communicating with him on Instagram at PushPullPray. You can check out our website at www.combatsportstalk.com, and you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Facebook, and Instagram. We now have merchandise on Amazon. Just search for Combat Sports Talk, and we've added a new section on the website for live events. I'm a little bit behind on trying to get 223 up, so I apologize to George about that. With nothing else, I'm gonna head out. Our theme music is composed by Scott McCurry at scottdeancountry.com. KC Onyebuchi produced our lead-ins. I want to thank you for joining us for another edition of Combat Sports Talk. For KC Onyebuchi, I'm Ryan Smith, reminding you to keep your hands up, your chin tucked, and throw bombs.